Devil's Workshop number 12, my name is Freeman Michaels, and my goal is the complete and total freedom of every human being on the planet. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how it is possible to get free water for life. And I say for life, it's basically as long as the equipment lasts, but if you take care of the equipment, it should last quite a while. So, free water for life for $3,000. And I broke it down. This air machine, air to water, it's $1,500. An inverter, I'm going to explain what all these do in a second. Inverter is 150. Battery, it's like a car battery, 120. Solar panels, 500, and a charge controller is $200 to $500, depending on how expensive you want to go. So the mindset I want to look at this from is not how you can save money long term, but shift your mindset to how you can get a service and just focus on that service. And that will give you a freedom of not having to worry about job market and what your currency is going to do. Too oftentimes we look at things just about how much money we're going to save per month. And I think if you look at things that way, you're going to never quite become independent off of the currency that you live on. And I'm just going to start calling it the dollar because that's what I live in. So the first step in this setup, the air to water machine, this is something you can buy off of Amazon. That's where I got it. When you look at the specifications, you can see it takes 470 watts. I just rounded it up to 500. This one's like if you want hot water. I don't really care about that. So just round up to 500 watts. So what that means is we need to have during the day 500 watts worth of solar power. And if things were perfect and the sun was always out and your panels were perfectly aligned, you might be able to get by with actually 500 watt panels. But realistically, I feel like that's not going to cut it. So for 500 watts of the power that this draws, I suggest at least as a bare minimum 1 kilowatt. That's 1,000 watts. Panels these days are cheap. I think you could easily get, I think it's 50 cents a watt is almost expensive now. You'd probably get it for cheaper than that. But if it was 50 cents a watt for 1 kilowatt, that would cost you $500. So with $500, you have enough energy when the sun is out, not necessarily in the morning or in the late evening, but when the sun is out, you have enough energy to run this machine. And it doesn't produce like mountains of water, and it's not like a waterfall or anything. But if you run it just during the day, which is when the sun is out, then you should have enough at least for drinking water. If you live in a drier climate, this is obviously not going to work as well. You can't run this at night because the battery generally is not going to have enough juice. Batteries are expensive. I don't want to get into that too much, but a car battery in general is 1,200 watt hours, and this thing is running 500 watts. So in theory, that would only be a couple hours, but it's actually way less than that because when you're pulling that much current out of a battery, it drops it. It's not even worth it. So this is just for something you would run during the day, for now. You need an inverter, and I found that when I started this thing up, even though the manual says it's 500 watts, it seems to take more like 1,500 to 2,000 watts. But that's just for a little bit and then it backs down. So this 1,500 watt inverter, I got this from Fry's. You see it's the continuous power is 1,500 watts, but then it's got a peak surge of 3,000. So what that means is that this thing will be, as long as you run it for a little bit, it'll be fine. So this thing turns on. I needed a large enough inverter to handle that peak load, and then the continuous draw of 500 watts, and this thing is a 1,500 watt inverter, so this will be plenty. So you would hook this up to the battery, and then you would pull in the power from the sun, through your charge controller, that's this guy. You can get cheap ones, I mean, they're as cheap as like 30 bucks on Amazon, but you have to look at how much they can draw in. So I recommend getting something. There's two things I would recommend for this setup. This is a 30 amp charge controller, and the it has, I was looking for it and I don't see it, it has MPPT. That's a gentle way of charging your battery. So if you don't want to be, if you want your battery to last longer, you would get a more expensive charge controller, and that would one, it's got smarts in it. I don't know what the heck it does, but MPPT. So you get a charge controller like that. The charge controller has to be able to handle all of the power from the solar panels. So you have to match those more or less. So this 30 amp, oh, did I not do that math right? You would need a 40 amp. Real quick, 50 amps is preferable, not 40. And this starts to get into the point where you'd want to have two 12-volt batteries and make a 24-volt system as opposed to just one 12-volt battery. But I wanted to keep it simple. A 40 amp would actually probably work, but a 50 amp would be safer. So you need the price is about the same. So I just dragged this in at the last minute to use as a demo. You would actually need a better charge controller than this. So probably a 40 amp, and I'd have to do the math on that. I'll add that in later. So you'd have a charge controller that has got enough capacity to handle 1 kilowatt and maybe then some. Now if you want to have this work on cloudy days, which is of course nice because cloudy days tend to be more humid, you would have to add more panels. But if you add more panels on the sunny day, your charge controller has to be able to handle that additional load. So there's some fudging around. It's like how much do you want to spend, and how often do you want this to generate water? To summarize, it's $1,500 for the water generator, $150 for the inverter, $120 for the battery. Panels, $500 plus, depending on how high you want to go. Charge controller, $200 to $500. $500 is at the higher end, certainly for this. They go a lot more expensive, but that's when you want to pull in a lot more energy. So a 40 amp charge controller, I haven't done the math, I just did that off the top of my head, and I know this actual model has the next version up is 40 amp, and it's not that much more expensive. So once I stop this, and I'll do the math in my head. And then there's miscellaneous stuff, you need wires and whatnot. That's $3,000. So if you're like, okay, how long would it take for me to offset the cost of if I spent $3,000 now, like my water bill is only $40 or $50, and then you do the math and you're like, it's a few years, it's not worth it. It's like you can look at it that way, and if your goal is to save money, that's probably a better way to save money. But if you change your goal, in addition to saving money, of course, but change your goal to not needing money to get, in this case, water, but you could do, I think a better way to start would be to scale down this. You wouldn't need a kilowatt of panels, and then you could just run a freezer. Like you could get, I destroyed this for Burning Man, but they have these battery boxes, and they're probably around $1,000 on Amazon, and you can get a couple 100-watt panels, and then that would run a freezer. That's an easier way to start, and you wouldn't have to do all the wiring and stuff. But having free pure water for life is an appealing thing. So $3,000, and if you stop looking at it as how long is it going to take me to earn this money back, and start looking at it as now I don't have to participate in the job market for clean water. And that $3,000, yes, it's all gone, it's said and done, but now you can move forward and you can apply that same type of mentality to other things, like keeping your food cold. So that is how you can have free water for life for $3,000 investment.